Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about slots 6 through 10 on the top 10 YouTube creators, YouTube commentators who have over 100,000 subs where their content is most useful to Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. That is the most useful to Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition Dungeon Masters and Dungeon players. That means if you're a Dungeon Master, if you're a 5th edition Dungeon Master, if you're a 5th edition Dungeon player, these are the top 10. This is 6 through 10 slot of the top 10 YouTube commentators who have over 100,000 subs, whose content is most useful to if a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition Dungeon Master or a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition player goes and looks for content from creators with over 100,000 subs. This is where they're going to land. All right, so I have a reminder for myself. Web 20, Great Jorf Blaine. So let's get into it. All right, number 6 on my list is WebDM. These guys are fascinating to me. I'm actually not a fan of their channel. Now, why would I say they're the most useful? They have early access, right? So one of the things, if you care about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and you're like, hey, I want to, learn about Dungeons & Dragons, some creators get early access, right? So I don't want to listen to WebDM. I don't like their content, right? Like, I'm not a fan of them, right? But I listen to their content a lot, and the reason why is they're specially anointed by Wizards of the Coast, and they get early access, which means the books I want to know about, they have them weeks ahead of time, right? Like weeks earlier than I do, right? So it's kind of a big deal, and so they have commentary that I need way before the book comes out to know if I want the book or to start to angle my campaign to get ready for the book to drop, right? So it's a big deal. Also, I'm absolutely fascinated them. They started as a partnership. It was Pruitt and Jim Davis. Now it's just Jim Davis, and Jim Davis is just sailing off. He's like, bye, right? And so I'm just so fascinated by what happened between the two of them. And and Pruitt said, hey, what's happening? Me commentating on Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is so struggle. The struggle is so high that I have to deal with my mental health and I have to deal with burnout. And I'll tell you, boy, it's some days it's hard to be a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Blank ain't easy. Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition commentating ain't easy because it's done in public, right? And you will not believe, like if you do it at length, you will not believe the personal cost that it takes. And so Pruitt was one of the first guys who, on a channel with 100,000 subs to say, this ain't easy, right? So I'm very, very fascinated by that. It's a thing. So, next is taking 20 with Cody, right? Again, and actually I have to say, I think most of the people going forward, I'm not really fans of their channel. They're on this list because they're a YouTuber creator with over 100,000 subs. And I follow Dungeons & Dragons commentary as a discipline, right? So I can't ignore any of these people, right? So I'm not a fan of taking 20, Cody. And the reality is, I think he wasted a ton of time on Pathfinder, and I think he realizes that now, right? Like he got mad like traffic last year by just, Paizo had treated him like a king. He got early access on I think almost everything. They were sending him books constantly. They were talking about him on official channels and stuff. He eviscerated them last year. It just came in and was like, Pathfinder 2 stinks, Pathfinder 1 stinks. I'm out. And literally just made public that he was jetting on Pathfinder. And so most of his content is aimed toward Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition at this point. He's an interesting creator. He's on the list. That's the most I can say about him, right? And here's the thing, I think he has over 200,000 subs, right? And so everybody on this list, man, they have done something that is dramatically difficult, right? I've been doing this for 18 years, and I have been doing this for 8 years, and I have 1,800 subs. That is ridiculously small, right? Every single one of these has done what I've done at a factor of 50 to a factor of time 100x, right? So everybody on this list has navigated problems and dealt with difficulties that I never found a solution for, right? And so I don't really like Taking 20's content. I don't think he's a great creator, right? But you can't argue with numbers, right? There are hundreds of thousands of people that find his content fascinating, and I think that's interesting. And I'm like, and then so I look at him, I'm like, why are people watching him? So yeah. So next I would say is how to be a great game master. This guy struggles to make sure that he never mentions Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, right? And a lot of people are like that. There's a stigma for many people on Twitter and the YouTube commentating group that are like, oh, I'm kind of ashamed to say that I play Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. It's a powerful thing. It's a powerful thread. It's like the hipster, like, I don't drink Starbucks, and he's very much in that zone. But in my opinion, he's talking Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. It's clear as day, right, if you're paying attention. He has a really great channel. I love his content. He is... so I'm sorry. I would put him in front of Taking 20. Sorry, let me switch them in order. So how to be a great dungeon game master. I listen to his content, and I've actually one of the things. So I've written one tabletop role playing game. Right, it's too complicated for most people to play. Right, and I didn't know why. So I wrote a tabletop role playing game, which I think is great. Right, but nobody else in the world does. And this guy is so smart. He actually explained to me after I finished my game why my game did not get any traction. It was just too complicated. And I did this boil of the ocean approach that he perfectly identified. He's brilliant. He knows tabletop role-playing game design at a level none of the other people on this list do. I think he's European, right? So he's not in America. So that's kind of interesting. He's interesting because the vast majority of these are in America, are on the American continent. They're either in Canada or America. I wouldn't be surprised if Expeda3 is Canadian. But he's one of the few internationals on this list, right? And so I think that's distinct. He has a great channel, great how to be a great GM. Next is Jord Fan, right? You're like, Jord Fan? He talks about old lore stuff. He does. You're 100% right. He does talk about old lore stuff. And so if you're going to be a good, and so the cream of the crop, right? And actually, the cream of the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, the very best Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition dungeon masters and dungeon players, what they do is they're like, I care about now. I care about culture right now. I want to be involved in cultural questions. I want the impact of my table to go beyond my table. I want the impact of my game to go beyond my table, to reach out into my community, to reach out into the DND community, to reach out into America, to reach out into the world, right? And then, in addition, and they say the way I'm going to get there is I'm going to know everything that's in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and I'm going to strap a booster rocket on my Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition game by going back and pulling the best of D&D 1E, 2E, 3E, 4E, and the best from the copies of older Dungeons and Dragons games, right? And basically, Jord Fan, I think, and he does do some 5th edition stuff, right? But the majority of his focus is on 1E, 2E, 3E, and 4E, right? And I think he does the best job of explaining Dungeons & Dragons lore, especially for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition dungeon masters and dungeon players to go back and mine that content and drag it into the now where it's going to matter, right? So Jord Fan is very, very good. Great Jord Fan. Last is Blaine Simple, okay? Blaine Simple makes the list because there is a list. There are not that many. It's hard to make a list of useful content for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition dungeon masters and players for people with over 100,000 subs, which tells you that doing D&D 5e content is hard, right? Like, because the reality is it just doesn't draw a ton of people, right? And so that's a reality, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. So basically, Blaine Simple, what he does is he makes funny videos, all right? And actually, when you listen to his videos, you can tell he actually knows the game really, really well. But he is making a joke of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, in my opinion. If you watch, and now, why wouldn't I just dismiss him from that perspective? Well, we live in a new, fresh, exciting, surprising world, right? And if you didn't pay attention, the real newscasters today are John Oliver and Trevor Noah. And Trevor Noah says more truth than I think anything you'd find on CNN, right? And so the reality is, our world has changed so much that people really can't listen to important things if there isn't a laugh injected every 5 minutes. And if you think I'm wrong, why do you think there's a laugh injected every 5 minutes in a Marvel movie? People are like, oh, can't you just let this thing stand? And they're like, no, if we don't make them laugh every 5 minutes, the vast majority of people can't continue to watch and listen, right? And I don't think they're wrong. And so plain simple, again, I really don't like that he makes a joke out of Dungeons and Dragons. But he does know the game, and there's definitely some cool things to learn if you watch his content. So check out this list in the doobly-doo below, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Who do you think? Did I leave anybody off the list? Which ones of these are your favorites? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.